I have always loved horses. I started playing with my mom's old Breyer horses at age 2, and I begged to ride until it finally became a reality at 4 years old, when she was able to find a trainer that would take me on as a student. I learned to ride on Arabian horses, and within a year, I was showing on the Arabian horse circuit in the walk trot classes as a 5-year-old.
Oh my gosh, she's just a tiny thing.
One of the most influential horses for teaching me how to ride and helping me into the show ring was this mare named Sam. She was absolutely wonderful. Looking back at these old clips though, I see that she is lame in some of the footage, and that really hurts my heart because she took such good care of me and was just such a sweet horse. So it makes me sad to see that she was uncomfortable during these clips. It didn't take long for me to decide that I wanted to be a horse trainer as my future career. I loved horses so much and I wanted to work with them when I was grown up. I also really wanted to have my own farm, and I begged my parents for years to move out onto a farm, and this never actually happened until about 2018 when I was very much an adult. But I still tried. Even back 23 years ago when I was this young, my mom was still very much my supporter, both behind the camera and at the ringside, to help me get the right diagonals and help me around the class along with my trainer. And you can hear her in some of these footages, especially in one where I won my first ribbon, how excited she was. And it makes my heart so whole to see how similar the commentary is even today, 23 years later. It was a huge privilege to have both the financial and emotional support of parents for so many years growing up.
So your second place ribbon is entry number 6, Shiny Touch.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! I don't believe it! Oh my goodness! I'm going.
Shining Touch and Shelby, yes.
I loved horses so much, but like a lot of children, I was taught to kick them and show them who's boss, and I wasn't really taught to handle them in the most gentle way. And even things that I wasn't directly taught, I witnessed. I witnessed a lot of punishment towards horses. I was encouraged to use harsher bits from quite an early age. I got my first horse, Farley, kind of by chance. It was about 8 months after my dad had had a massive stroke and become disabled, and I begged my parents for him because when he came into the barn as a training horse, he was the most beautiful horse I'd ever seen. My trainer at the time wouldn't let me ride him because they thought he was too much horse for me. But I begged and I begged every lesson, even still. When my trainer went away and her mom took on my lessons, once again I asked to ride Farley when they asked what horse I wanted to ride. She didn't know that I hadn't ridden him before, so she let me ride him, and I survived, and from then on I was allowed to ride him, and then we eventually purchased him several months later after leasing. I had Farley for years. He was difficult and he had a bolting problem, which was induced by the lack of turnout that he had, because as soon as I moved him to a place with turnout, he was bomb-proof and safe. Farley and I showed on the Arabian horse circuit for a number of years, and he won me a lot of ribbons, and I learned a lot with him. He was not an easy horse, and the fact that he didn't get enough turnout made him a lot more difficult than what he would have been, but I loved him nonetheless. I do feel bad that I wasn't able to provide him as nice of a life for a lot of the years as I could have, but as soon as I learned how much turnout changed his behavior, it changed everything for me, and my management practices started to shift. My first OCTB was a 4-year-old mare named Maya. She was your stereotypical thoroughbred and was very sensitive, nervous, and hot. She was quite the challenge for me and taught me a lot about thoroughbreds, even if I rushed her. I got her as a training project to help me make more money to purchase a future horse to train and use for jumping. I sold her to a home that kept her for a long time until she unfortunately died of colic. I then got another off-the-track thoroughbred, a 5-year-old gelding named Dallas, and he was the absolute love of my life. Within a month of getting him off the track, I could ride him bridleless. He was such a sweetheart, and he was honestly just one of the best horses I've ever had. Still to this day, I love him so much and would take him back in a heartbeat if he needed another home. He was a horse that I intended to keep forever, but my priority was jumping. Unfortunately, I rushed him up the levels and he started to rush fences, and then I started to use harsher bits like elevator bits as a means of controlling him, even though the issue was in the training. Unfortunately, during a winter day, he slipped in the paddock and strained his stifle, and then was no longer going to be sound for jumping. I rehomed him to a home where he still is, and I still go visit him to this day intermittently because I love him so much. I started my search for a horse who was old enough to start training and jumping right away and would be sound for jumping, but I ended up adopting a 2-year-old gelding from the SPCA after seeing his ad and falling in love with him and just knowing that I needed to go see him. After I went to see him, I decided to adopt him. His name was Milo. Since Milo was too young to ride, I leased an Oldenburg gelding from the trainer that I was getting lessons with, and I showed him over the course of a summer so that I would have a horse to ride. I decided that I didn't like riding someone else's horse and didn't like riding around on a horse who'd been trained by someone else. It didn't feel as rewarding, so ultimately I decided to get another off-the-track thoroughbred to train in the meantime. I got a 4-year-old mare named Sydney, and she was wonderful. She was hot and sensitive, kind of like Maya, but I learned a lot from her, and she was wonderful. I rehomed her to a home that kept her until she unfortunately passed away from a pasture accident. And as Milo grew up, I continued working with him. He was a very difficult horse. He was very reactive and flighty and super full of energy. This was in part due to the fact that he didn't have large enough turnout, and he also didn't get to go out with friends all of the time, so it added to his level of reactivity and made him a lot more difficult than what he needed to be. When I started him under saddle, I started him under saddle bitless, which is something that I still stand by today and I'm very proud of. However, I did rush him in other ways that you'll hear about later. I got another off-the-track thoroughbred as a training project. His name was Rabbit, and he was very beautiful, but he was one of the most neurotic thoroughbreds that I've ever owned, so after retraining him and getting him to settle, I rehomed him to another person who unfortunately rehomed him right away. Lesson learned from that was to not always trust what you hear from people. The start of making horses a career came with getting the opportunity to learn how to gallop race horses. It was very difficult and very physically taxing, and it took me a while to pick up on. I started out with one trainer who then unfortunately got injured, and then I started riding for the trainer that I worked with for a number of years, and eventually by the end of that summer was galloping all of her race horses when her main exercise rider went on a vacation and was gone for several months. It was a very difficult learning curve, but I learned so much about thoroughbreds on and off the track, and also became a much better rider through this opportunity. All throughout this, I was still getting in off-the-track thoroughbred projects to train and rehome. This is Archie, who was 4 years old when I sold him, and he's still very loved by the same home that I sold him to. Milo had become my main riding horse, and he was coming along nicely under saddle. However, off property, especially over fences, he was quite nervous and would refuse. While I could ride him bridleless in areas that he was comfortable with, he was still a very nervous horse who I had pushed too fast to produce over fences, and he became nervous as a result. I started training horses for clients and gave up my amateur status and started horses under saddle for a number of clients, and also trained already broke horses for clients as well. And this is where I started to build my training business and really fulfill my dream of becoming a professional horse trainer. I really loved it, but doing all of this in addition to galloping upwards of 10 to 15 horses a day really burnt me out over time. Milo I started to show more, and he was doing well over fences and refusing less, but he was still very nervous, and I have a lot of regrets about how hard I pushed him. In summer 2018, after being given a very nice thoroughbred mare from the trainer I worked with, I bred her to the warm blood stallion Banderas, and she started cooking what would be my first homebred foal. And this is just an example of some of the issues I was having with Milo as he came back from rehabbing a minor tendon injury and was very hot and difficult. This is the type of reactive behavior that he would intermittently show. 2018, I rescued 2 horses from slaughter. One was a completely unhandled pony, and this was my very first experience handling a horse and gentling a horse who had never been handled by people very much. So it was very exciting, and it was a good learning experience because he was super nervous. And this is where I started to use positive reinforcement more systematically to help train horses. Was critical to getting the pony haltered, and it brought him along much quicker when I used rewards-based systems because the pressure scared him. However, it wasn't as smooth and good as how I use positive reinforcement now, but he still came along very nicely. I rehomed him to a home that he's still in today, and he became a winning A-circuit pony. Roulette, the filly that I had, was much more handled and was very, very friendly. And to this day, she is one of the easiest horses I've ever started under saddle and was just so gentle and easygoing. I sold her to a family home where she became a wonderful family horse, and she still is. Also in fall of 2018, I fell in love with one of the horses that was at the barn I galloped for. He was at the time a 3-year-old thoroughbred named George. He had a loose chip in his ankle that was supposed to be set and fine and small and good to go. However, after purchasing him, I found out that this wasn't the case and that it was a lot larger than what the owner had anticipated, and he unfortunately needed surgery to get bone chips removed in 2 legs, and then he had 2 slab fractures in the hind legs. So it was a lengthy and expensive surgery and rehab process, but he was such a good boy and took it so well even during the stall rest period. And so I continued his rehab and brought him along with the intention of having him be my retired racehorse project horse, where we would take him to Kentucky in the fall to compete. And this was a lot more difficult because of his injuries. Also in 2019, I had the birth of my very first homebred foal, Banksy. He was everything that I wanted and much more. He had the most unique markings I had ever seen, and right from birth he was super friendly and just absolutely delightful, and he was just an absolute pleasure to be around. So this made the year of 2019 very fun and also busy and engaging because I now had this little bundle of joy to play with.
Friends, will lay down next to me?
Look at those legs.
Yeah, I'm talking to you. I am. Hi. Oh.
So this colt today is awarded with a premium. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a very good cross.
Right before we left for Kentucky in October, we were given Pogo, George's half-brother, from the same breeder and owner that had George because she could no longer afford him. And this was a blessing in disguise. At the time when we took him on, the intent wasn't to keep him long-term, but you'll see what happened. Anyways, George and I made it to Kentucky, and it was a very cool and rewarding experience. And he was excellent. He exceeded any and all expectations because he was a lot more green than other horses there might have been because he had a far later and slower start because of the surgeries that he needed to have. But he settled right in and was just absolutely fantastic, as he always was. He was just the sweetest and most gentle boy. After Kentucky, I came home and got to know Pogo a little bit better, and my mom started to fall in love with him and play with him lots, and she really liked him. Pogo was only 2 years old at this time, and him and George got to hang out, and they were really happy little brothers. And then George had most of the winter off, but I played with him bareback sometimes, and he hung out lots with his little brother, and it was just a really chill and relaxed winter because George was getting most of the time off after Kentucky. And Milo, I continued to jump, and he was getting much braver, and his refusing problem was stopping. And Pogo and Milo started to become really good friends. Pogo was the first horse Milo really bonded with. And then Banksy was growing up really well. He moved to my client's place after being weaned to go live with some friends.
He's just a baby.
Unfortunately, in the new year, George started to show some neurological symptoms, and we started to explore what this could be. Initially, we thought it might be wobblers, and then we thought it might be EPM, so we started to treat him for EPM while we waited for his blood results to come back. And unfortunately, his neurological issues continued to get worse even on the medication. He started doing weird stretching like this and was just wobbly. However, his personality remained unchanged. Yeah, kill the protozoa.
Be the poster child for it.
For every ailment a horse can possibly have, he's the poster child. But unfortunately, the treatment didn't work, and eventually I had to euthanize him just before his 5th birthday, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. But a silver lining was that we had his half-sibling Pogo, who was a lot like him. And even after the heartbreak, life continued on. I had more appreciation for my horses, and we enjoyed starting Pogo under saddle with the intention of keeping him now. My horses got to enjoy more grass turnout, and I continued to work at the racetrack, getting to leave the starting gates for the first time ever, and also working some horses. But eventually this led to massive burnout, both physically and mentally, because I was riding upwards of 20 horses a day, and it was just absolutely killing me. So eventually I stopped. But this was a very busy year for me in 2020. Milo and I got to show at Thunderbird in one of their fake schooling shows because this was during the pandemic. And we also did lots of bridleless riding. And also Pogo just further immersed himself in the herd and became best friends with both Milo and Banksy. And he was just a very special boy. Fall 2020, a trainer at the track gave me 2 thoroughbred mares to train and rehome for free, and one of them was this bay mare named Harlow, who was super reactive and difficult and was just honestly a bit of a nightmare to handle initially. I didn't like her very much, but I knew she was very stressed, and this is also where I started to use positive reinforcement more to help her relax. And I continued to get to watch Banksy grow up and build a truly close and special relationship with him. From the beginning, I used positive reinforcement as his primary method of training, and he became a very brave, bold, friendly, and generally happy horse who was very easy to train and really enjoyed training. Okay. Gonna step on it. Oh my goodness. Are you serious, guys? As Harlow started to settle, I was riding her more. She had a lot of discomfort in her poll from being galloped in an elevator bit and would go around extremely hollow and nervous. So we did lots of hacking and trail rides, and eventually she started to relax and become a much more comfortable horse. You've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. That is just so cute. As I built connections, I was more able to access larger turnout areas for my horses, which exponentially benefited their welfare, and it was really lovely to see the horses off the racetrack get to have lots of room to run and play, and how happy it made them.
Ooh, wowee!
Harlow was continuing to come along very nicely and teaching me all about just how much relaxation can impact the overall personality of a horse. As she got more comfortable physically and mentally, she truly became a different horse. She became reliable, calm, quiet, and sweet, and really enjoyed being around people. And although I was initially planning to have her as a resale project, I decided to keep her because I just fell in love with her.
Wow, good girl. Yeah.
To be honest, for years I preferred geldings and somewhat bought into the stereotypes against mares, but after getting Harlow, I don't believe in any of them because she is the sweetest, most reliable, kind, and just brave and fun horse to be around, and she's not marish at all. Through 2021, I got the opportunity to ride some pretty cool horses before I eventually kind of pulled away from jumping for quite some time. I kind of got Pistachio on a whim after a friend had rescued him from slaughter at an auction, and then he came in to live with me and I gentled yet another feral horse. 2022, I got to have a clinic with one of my role models, Shauna Karash, and it was very, very cool to learn more from her, and it kind of furthered my focus of positive reinforcement and just the value of it and how powerful it was as a training mechanism.
Come here. Come on. Good boy. So good.
I continued to build a very special friendship with Banksy, and I was no longer focused on just riding. It was just fun to handle him on the ground. So all throughout his 3-year-old year, although in times past I definitely would have wanted to start him under saddle as a 3-year-old, I decided not to, and we just did groundwork and we hung out and become better friends. Using positive reinforcement on Pistachio taught me how well behaviors hold because I didn't work with him very much and he still improved immensely and was calm even after time off. And yeah, most of my year of 2022 was honestly just about finding myself and really finding who I was as a person and what I wanted to do as a trainer long term, because I was just so burnt out from previous years. I also got to visit Dallas, the black thoroughbred that I had when I was 18 and kept until I was about 19 or 20. And he is still the sweetest boy, and he's still in the lovely home that I sold him to, and they let me visit him whenever I want. But throughout 2022, I continued to develop Pistachio and get him going under saddle. And then I also, on a whim, got a yearling unhandled filly to Gentle after her owner didn't have any time for her. And she came along really quickly and just started to absolutely love people in basically no time at all, and was just an overall happy girl. Her name was Gala. And in fall 2022, I got to fulfill a lifelong dream of getting 2 wild Mustangs to retrain in Gentle with positive reinforcement. And then I also had moved my horses to a new place at this point the summer prior, and they were much happier. They had over 8 acres of field turnout to hang out with and just be out in a much larger herd. And seeing how much happier it made them and how much it benefited their overall personality and demeanor, and just how wonderful it was to have them out all together, was really fulfilling, and it furthered my dream of eventually getting my own place to have horses to rehab and train. My Mustangs came along really well with the positive reinforcement work, and even though they were out on a large pasture and could run away from me, I was able to gentle them. And my horses continued to enjoy their large turnout and really live their best life, even through the cold winter months, even through temperatures of -20 and below. And this is one of the first years that I didn't blanket them all completely, and I really learned about their thermoregulation and just how happy they are naked. And then as 2023 rolled around, Banksy was almost 4, so I started the process of starting him under saddle, and he was the absolute goodest boy ever. And once again, this really drove home the point of how well positive reinforcement works and how well horses hold behaviors trained with positive reinforcement, because I could go quite some time without working with him and he would still be quiet and easy to deal with. Unlike in past times with horses like Milo when he was younger, they'd get really hot and difficult to handle after time off. So it was really cool to see how much better my relationships with all of my horses were from this method. An added bonus was that it actually made them have super good recall too, which meant that I never had to go catch my horses on their new large pasture because they would just come when I called them. I was rebuilding my relationship with Milo after having pushed him too hard for a number of years, and I had also rehabbed him to barefoot, which was a huge undertaking because of how damaged his feet were from long-term being in shoes and having an underrun low heel. But in 2023 we started to get to do more. We got to go on trail rides with Pistachio through train tunnels and through forest. We even went through a drive-through, and it was just a super cool year, and it was the first year in a little while that I really got to ride Milo lots. Eventually I sold Pistachio to his new home, and then I got to focus on my boy Milo even more, and we got to do fun things like bridleless riding on the beach again, and he was much happier barefoot. And then I also brought Banksy along more. So this year of 2023 was really about kind of finding myself and focusing on myself and my own horses more, rather than signing my life away to clients and working with race horses and horses that weren't mine to such a point that I would be physically and mentally exhausted at the end of the day, and I would only really be able to take care of my horses just for the necessities, like giving them food and water and like brushing them or blanketing them and just doing more work. This was the first year in a while that I really got to enjoy my horses, because I had built my business to a point where I had the ability to enjoy my horses without needing to worry about money as much, and it was really freeing. I got to further discover myself and really kind of figure out exactly what training methods I really believed in and kind of explore my opinions on horse behavior and welfare with much more freedom, because I got to look at it within my own horses and be a little bit more picky about which clients I took and what I would do with horses, because I wasn't as reliant on working for the money and having to worry about getting paid enough, so I could turn down situations that made me uncomfortable with more freedom and not feeling uncomfortable about it, which was really freeing. With my Mustangs has also been a really freeing and meditative experience, because I've been able to help them learn to like people rather than having their association with people come through force. And we've really built a wonderful friendship. And then in 2024, I intend to start them under saddle eventually. But overall, these years have really just been about discovering myself. And it's really only been within the last 3 or 4 years that I've really figured out who I am and how I want to show up for my horses and what my lifelong goals are without having them be tainted or influenced influenced by other
And here he
people's opinions
comes.
and what they want to do.
Thinks
Horses
he's a
have
bad
helped me
friend.
find
He
who
waits
I
for
am,
Milo
and
to
that
come
has been
back, and then as
so,
soon as
so
he's
rewarding.
back, he's just like,
I'm really thankful for all that I have learned over the years and how it has benefited my horsemanship as a whole. And I'm really grateful for the fact that I've learned how to be softer and kinder and more rewarding in training horses, because it has benefited my relationships with all of the horses I handle, even client horses. And it has also improved my own mental health. We don't need to be dominating, harsh, or overly strict with horses in order to have them be safe to handle. We don't need to be harsh or cruel to them. We can be soft, kind, and be their friends and still have safe relationships with them. And this is one of the most valuable things that I've learned about horses. And it has really improved my mental health by making me a kinder, more patient, and less frustrated or angry person. So I'm so thankful for the impact that horses have had on my mental health and who I am as a person, because they have helped me find my own identity.